Hello and welcome to the India Today Board of India Today Experts Pre-Budget Roundtable. A very warm welcome to all of you. With me, my colleague MG Arun, the Executive Editor of India Today, and with us, a bevy of experts amongst the best in India to discuss what lies ahead in Budget 23-24. To my immediate left, Dr. Niranjan Hiranandani, co-founder and the managing director of a very well-known real estate company, the Hiranandani Group. To our right, Dr. Ajit Ranade, the Vice Chancellor of the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics at Pune. With us, Dr. D.K. Joshi, Chief Economist at CRISIL. Madan Sabnavis, the Chief Economist at the Bank of Baroda. Sunil Badala, the Partner and National Head, BFSI Tax. And tax is very important, and he's from KPMG India. And finally, Vivek Kumar, economist at Quant Eco Research. What we are going to do today on this expert roundtable is to try and set the priorities for Budget 23-24. And while the political economy of the budget is really the last full budget of the present second term of the Modi government, there's a lot that India's economy needs at a time when the external environment is extremely challenging. So MG Arun and I are trying to get our experts to speak about what their priorities are, and to start, I'll request Dr. Hiranandani to tell us that one single big priority that he expects the Finance Minister to focus on, and then we'll get everyone to make their opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. I think the challenge of the budget is definitely there, because there are so many people demanding lots and lots of things. But two things I believe are going to be most important. The individual. I think a lot of investments we talked about to the corporate entity, but the maximum marginal rate of tax for an individual who does very well is only 42%. Now 42% as distinguished from 15 and 25 for the corporate entities, 35 for the partnership and other things. I think it means that a person, individual who actually is entrepreneur, has to create companies, partnerships and others in order to reduce his tax. Somewhere down the line, I think this needs a correction definitely, okay, which needs to start off with. The second part is, I think, the investment required in the economy. I think the amount of investment needed has to be doubled.
Okay.
There is no other way but to do that, because unless we don't do that, we need to get into a double-digit GDP growth in the next 3 years. To achieve that, investment has to come from the government, from the private sector and combined. Yes, they are doing it. They need to do more.
They need to do more. MG, we'll get Dr. Ranade. What Hiranandani has started with is captioned as Axe the Tax. What would you say is that single one big ticket item that you would want the FM to focus on?
Pause the populism, if you want me to, because we are just coming out of COVID. We have come out of this a huge extension of the free food program, and fiscal situation is definitely not ideal. So I think, and this is the last budget before the general elections of 2024. So there will be a temptation to go massively populist on this budget. So if you want a one-liner from me, pause the populism. But if you will permit me half a minute more, I think we need to focus, as Mr. Hiranandani said, we definitely need a huge upswing on the private sector capex, capital spending, investment spending. I think we need a special focus on the MSME sector, because they are the real contributors to industrial growth, exports and employment. And I also would like to see a special focus on exports, because while it's true that the world is going to be in a bit of a recession this year, but India's share of world trade is just about 1 or 2%, and even if we double it to 4%, that's 100% growth for us, but for the world it's just a small difference. So I think exports, MSME and private sector capex.
Okay. I think we already are seeing a kind of a consensus emerging as far as the investment is concerned, because that is one area which needs a lot of thrust, and we have seen even the latest numbers that have come in the advanced estimate that the big investment is still coming from the government. The private investment has started in a way, but it has not got the real push it needs. Maybe Dr. Joshi, you can come in here and spell for us, what are the big things that you would like the government to focus on in the budget?
From the investment perspective?
Overall.
Overall, I think the one topic, if you want, is, I would say, fiscal rectitude. And I think the reason for that is threefold. One, I think among the similarly rated countries, India has the highest debt to GDP ratio. So you need to bring it down. Second, I think government has made a commitment of sorts by saying that they want to reduce the deficit to 4.5% of GDP by 25-26. So that's a gradual, you have to be on that path. And number three, I think RBI is trying to control inflation, and I think and they are trying to curb demand. If you become fiscally irresponsible, so to say, then you will be working against that. So I think you need to have a policy which is complementary to RBI's policy of controlling inflation. I think this doesn't mean don't do investment. This only means, I think what Ajit was saying, I think curb populism so that you have money to spend on investment.
Madan, that's very same question to you, that big one ticket item.
I think the big ticket item will be that the government needs to look at the salary class. Because we've seen almost every year the government says, look, our hands are tied and we'll wait for another year. So that's been happening around 4 or 5 years. Now, if you've seen the way in which inflation has been cumulatively around 20% in the last 3 years, I think the salary class definitely needs certain kind of breaks. And when we're saying that consumption has slowed down, your purchasing power has come down because of inflation. So therefore, I think having a kind of a formula, for example, to say that my exemption limit should be linked to inflation. Every time inflation goes up by 5%, 6%, the exemption limit also goes up. We need to change those brackets, not just at a higher level. I think at all the levels, I think we need to do it. I think that's something which the government should be taking on now. And since we're talking of election time, we're talking of populism, this will also be populist.
Sunil, I think everybody so far has mentioned axe the tax in different words. As the tax practitioner on the panel, what would you say? Is it feasible? Because when we have spoken to people in government, they're saying, you know, our hands are tied, kharche bahut hai.
Yes. No, so in fact, first of all, you know, both Mr. Hiranandani and Amin Madan, I think they've just spoken about what I would have actually liked to say. But having said that, I think there are a couple of other things which I think I would want government to do before answering your question, which is that, you know, there are a number of big policy announcements which we've been actually discussing. For example, we've been talking about big labor reforms. Okay, they've been already there, you know, people have been talking about it, but the enactment and implementation has to be there, because this is intended to bring a lot of clarity and consistency across the country. So that's one thing which comes in my mind. Secondly, you know, we are also talking about, let's say, Indian companies accessing overseas market and therefore somehow enable them to list in the overseas stock exchanges. Okay. So, you know, there are these kind of policy announcements which have happened but not been implemented. I would say, you know, it is something that the government should seriously
complete the unfinished agenda. Quick comment on the tax part and then we'll go to debate.
On the tax part, I think, I mean, I think it's possible. You know, looking at the way our tax collections have you know, increased in last couple of years, it is very much you know, possible and feasible.
And possible to what extent when it comes to PIT, personal income tax?
Well, I would say let's say basic exemption limit, which was set way back in 2014. If you ask me, that 2.5 lakh rupees must be increased to 5 lakh rupees.
Okay.
Can I intervene? Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm of a different view. Taking the cue from what you said, I want to just change it. There was a time when the government needed 96% rate of tax in order to collect the tax, and everybody cheated. When you reduce the tax rate, your collection actually goes up. That's the secret. Now, I'm only sharing this secret with the government that please reduce your tax rate and your collections will go up.
Is that what is happening in GST?
Yeah. You see, you see, the GST is a different matter. I'm talking about the direct tax. We'll talk about GST separately. I've got some views on that. But what I'm saying for the budget at this point of time, if you reduce the tax rates from this 42%, from this 25% to 24%, 23%, and 35% to the others, your actually collection. There people, I'm telling you, a lawyer friend of mine in March last year said, please don't send me the bill. I said, you will not send the bill? He said, "Arey, 42% tax hai, please send it to me in April, at least I'll get some time to pay the tax." In reality, he was telling me, I mean, the tax rate at an individual is ridiculous. And he was complaining like mad, and he spent 15 minutes complaining about his tax, and he spent only 5 minutes on my matter. So the issue is, I mean, and he's a very eminent lawyer. So what I'm trying to put across is that when you put a negative rate of tax, your collections are actually coming down. If you reduce the rate of tax, and pardon my statement to you, your collection is going to go up. So let us understand this very clearly.
Right.
The direct rate of tax, the amount of people who will cheat tax will be more when you increase the rate of tax. Please reduce the rate of tax, especially things like 35, 42. All the rates should come down to 25. Okay. Once you bring everything to 25, your collections will double, not reduce. That's my view.
There is merit in that point. We'll pick it up later.
There's an economist called Laffer who propounded what he just said, that there's a sweet spot when you actually decrease the rate of tax, the revenues increase. So you have to find that sweet spot. What is that sweet spot for the economy?
Have you tried modeling it on that curve?
We haven't, but it should definitely be lower than what the current rate of taxation is.
So I just wanted to make one point. I think, sorry, just to supplement what you said, that corporate tax has actually gone down from 33 to 25%, right? And the tax collections only has gone up. So
25%
it just proves the point.
Per annum, just
absolutely.
by reducing the tax rate, you have increased.
It just proves the point that you made.
Corporate rate tax.
This is a panel, so of course there's going to be a debate. But I must say that India is one of the absolute outlier. We have some 4% of the population pays income tax, and half of them file zero taxes. That's number one. Secondly, per capita income of the country is about 1.2 lakhs only, per man, woman and child. And we are asking for exemption at 5 or 6 lakhs, which is 400% of per capita income. That's like in the US, giving tax exemption to $250,000. So therefore, the point is that if you try to decrease indirect taxes are going to go up, and which hurts the poor much more. Indirect taxes hurt the poor more than the rich. And therefore, by saying that direct taxes have to come down, or rather, whatever, you are indirectly saying that the indirect taxes. So therefore, be cautious about this.
But can I pick a small point on that with you? Then there is a fundamental problem in the taxation architecture. You are absolutely right that indirect taxes need to be moderate. Direct taxes are linked to someone's capacity to pay. Yet we have a GST which the government, union and states have decided every year it has been changed, many months it has been changed. Then the blame lies on the taxation architecture. It still doesn't take away from the argument that the middle class needs a break.
The GST rates have to come down to a moderate rate. Was the original Kelkar Task Force recommendation was 12%. We are at 18, the median rate. And the direct taxes, by the way, are such that you need to find ways to widen the tax net. Don't keep, this creep of inflation creep and, exemption limits at 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs. It just means that the same guys, you're not, why is only 3 or 4% of the people covered? We should have 10 or 15%, and that's what the Prime Minister also said.
No, I think that's not a basis to say merely because I have a small universe that we should not be reducing the taxes. When I'm saying that you need to reduce the income tax rates, it's based on the fact that we have had inflation, cumulative inflation, which affects everyone. Then don't stand back and complain and say, why is consumption not increasing? Because we don't want to, inflation is high, we don't want to increase interest rates to give the savers any kind of benefit. We are saying again, inflation is high, I don't want to reduce taxes because my budget is going to be affected. See, finally we need to define what is the job of the government, what is the job of the budget. Here we are saying that everything has to be done to bring about growth, we need to have rectitude, we should not be increasing taxes. You're not going to go anywhere, no, there should not be populism, don't give free food. There can be lots of debates on each and every item. So in that case, a budget can never be formulated to make all of us out here happy. So here we're just talking of point by point, whether it's possible for us to reach some kind of a compromise in this kind of a situation. And today the major concern has been inflation. Everybody agrees that even the 6% inflation is not 6%. You go to the market and you see everything has gone up by 10 to 15%. It's not 6%. Numerically, yes, it's 6%. Just remember, inflation does not mean prices are coming down. The rate of increase of prices is coming down because of a statistical reason.
Absolutely.
Okay? Most of the corporates in their results have already mentioned in their commentaries that they are in the process of passing on higher input costs. My toothpaste could be becoming more expensive.
Right.
My shaving cream is going to become more expensive. So when we are having this kind of cumulative inflation, how do I actually make sure I bring about a balanced budget?
Okay.
That's why I think cutting income tax rate is something which has been deferred for so many years. Every year you say, look, my hands are tied, I cannot say only 3% pay per tax, or which most of them are anyway, they have zero returns, so therefore I won't do it.
I just wanted to come to another big issue that is a part of the daily discourse, but it needs urgent attention, and that is of the jobs. In fact, the CMI data talks about unemployment at over 8% in December, which is one of the highest, I think, since the pandemic had started. But we narrowed down a little bit to find out where are the pressure points within this, and we found that between the age group of 20 to 24, the unemployment is highest. For December, it was around 48%. And and this compared to pre-COVID, which was just around 20%, which means that COVID has had a huge impact on employment, and we need to create certain ways in which we can really address the kind of people who are coming into the labor force, which could be in millions every year. So I think maybe Dr. Joshi can come in. What is your larger view on what are the key measures the government should do to address this particular issue?
Well, I think you are absolutely right. I think, but one problem is that you're talking about CMI data, but we don't track unemployment well in this economy. I mean,
Right.
there's unemployment, there's underemployment, and I think these are only partial measures that we respond to. So we need, first of all, we need a measure of unemployment. I think the statistics department has to be focused on that. Apart from that, I think it's not very difficult to assess that there is a job problem. I mean, because number one, I think the number of people who are coming into the job market are increasing. Over the next 10 years, our birth rate is falling, but still we'll add about 100 million to the working age population, which is actually 22% of the global increment in the workforce. So that's a massive increase that is taking place. At the same time, the economy is becoming less labor absorptive. What I mean is that to produce 1 unit of GDP, you need less people now. So you need to grow much faster if you want to absorb those people. So this is the challenge. Now, I think the sector, from a sector perspective, the sector which is most labor absorptive, I think is without agriculture, is construction sector. Still, I think it remains, because although construction is getting modernized, but I think it is able to absorb semi-skilled and unskilled people still in the hinterland.
The most in any other sector.
Yeah, and it almost employs as many people as the manufacturing does. So that is number one. Number two, I think within manufacturing is the standard prescription that you need to get more focused on textiles, etc., where there is still an opportunity to export itself. So that is. Now coming to the third element of job creation, I think services, within services there are areas which are very labor intensive, which is health, education and hospitality. Now I think if we push these up, if you push health and education up, not only you create jobs, but you also make your labor force more educated, more employable. I think so all these things put together, I think will help you in reducing the pain that comes from reducing labor intensity of the economy. And here I think also what is important is the production itself has become capital intensive, I think partly because of the labor laws. I think the manufacturing is becoming more automated because automation is less painful than having employees, I mean, if you can't handle them. So I think if you put all these things together, what I would say is that there are ways in which you can do it, but I think you'll have to, but there is very little scope of addressing this problem.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of quick points. Budget is not a forum for creating jobs, number one. Two, jobs are generally created in the private sector. Now, when we look at, I'm looking at just the organized corporate sector, look at the annual reports which give you the head count. Earlier we used to see growth of around 5 to 6%. Since pandemic, the growth, it fell in 2021, 21-22, it's around 2%, which obviously means jobs are not being created. And I think that's the fundamental issue. I need to have growth. Growth is what is going to engineer greater employment opportunities. And I think today with companies also preferring technology rather than having human beings for whatever reason it is, we are always going to have this problem. But if we don't tackle this issue, we will again have this thing of, say, for the last 5-6 years, we're saying consumption is not increasing. So notwithstanding the fact that Ajit says that we should not be lowering the tax rate, I think we need to give, no, because if you see finally growth gets affected, why? Because investment doesn't take place. Investment doesn't take place because I have surplus capacity. Why do I have surplus capacity? Because consumption is not growing. Why is consumption not growing? Income is not growing. Why income not growing? Jobs are not there. So how do we actually get out of this entire circle?
Let's open it up.
Let's remember, Siddharth, that jobs are not going to be created by the Ambanis or Adanis or Tatas or Birlas or even in the armed forces.
But by Hiranandani, yes.
It's going to They're going to be created by small enterprises. See, if you want jobs to grow, you want enterprises to grow. That's why you come back to half of industrial output, half of our exports, half of our employment is generated at the small scale. And those guys are struggling pre-COVID and certainly post-COVID. So the MSME sector, we call it MSME, it's a fancy acronym, but basically there are 63 million enterprises in India, of which 99% are small enterprises. In fact, even for construction, there are these vendors and ancillaries, they supply. So let's focus on where the pain point there. That's where the jobs are going to be created.
Let him end that after. I agree with Ajit on the MSME, but I'll just focus on real estate for a moment. Let me give you 2 stories on that. 20 years ago, when we wanted 100 skilled workers, I would get 500 to come to my site. Okay. Today, when I want 100 skilled workers, I don't get 20. Beautiful point. So the problem is, on one side you're talking about unemployment, on the other side I'm not getting skilled workers. So that's a major problem.
I have to interrupt you here and put it in context for the audience.
Yes.
This is one of the least spoken matters, and at policy forums also this does not get attention. We look at gross numbers of people in India, but the fact is sector upon sector, including the media sector, frankly, does not have enough qualified people who are coming. Is this because of Manrega? I'll take that to the economist, but I'll ask you to first reply to that question.
First, let's get to the point. The point is, your 1 rupee, 100 rupees put into the real estate sector gives you 1,000 times more employment than putting it into the manufacturing sector because of automation and other things which has taken place.
But it can't be a either or debate.
No. Manufacturing has to be number one. Right. It's not either or. If you want employment to take place and you want a double-digit GDP growth for India, there is no other way but to do housing and infrastructure. So if China did a double-digit growth at
China and Manrega, sir. I want you to say this because you have raised an extremely important point.
But let's not go into controversy. First, let's get to the reason, the truth of the real estate sector, and I'll answer Manrega separately.
Okay.
The truth of the real estate sector is that you haven't pushed it good enough. We've got a Niti Aayog statement which has said that if you want $5 trillion economy and a $10 trillion economy, 20% has to be in real estate and infrastructure.
Can I posit to you that real estate is amongst the least reformed sectors? It is a sinkhole of all manner of practices which perhaps should not happen. And I am not holding the private sector alone.
And it's not a question of private or public. It's a question of a sector. Whether the government builds it, CIDCO builds it, MHADA builds it, it doesn't matter. I don't care who builds it, including Mr. Ambani and Adani. It doesn't matter who builds it. Whether Hiranandani builds it or anybody will. The question is, half my city, the richest city in the country, Mumbai, has 50% people living in jhopatpattis who half of them can afford to buy a house of the size which they stay. We don't have a program by which we give them the houses. We have talked about it 25 years ago. We talked about it 10 years ago. I was part of the drafting of the National Housing Policy. We are not doing enough.
With that, it's a wrap on this. If you have watched this show, thank you very much. We'll be back with more. Till then, goodbye.